So, good evening. Just before I start, I must say this is very heartening. As Marty has said, we've had quite a lot of these conferences, a whole series, and never have we had such a large group of people with us who said they're actually teachers. The teachers coming to this ENWAP have been so rare. They're like hen's teeth, and they've come for an hour and disappeared again. And I think it's a wonderful step that this shows the collaboration that is needed in all our school communities across the world. That in ENWAP we've made a big step in this recognition today that we have people who say, I like the word just a teacher, because we hear so often just a parent, which is totally nonsense. Nobody's just anything, but it was nice to see both sides of that argument. Okay? I'm going to disappoint you a bit because I'm going to speak longer than half an hour. Okay? It's in half an hour in the program, but we spoke earlier, and Marty and the group said I could speak a little longer if I felt inspired. So I might be. I probably will be. Okay? Over 100 years ago, Rudolf Steiner warned of how the development of human beings in the future, that there will be a tendency to a mechanization of the soul. That what we have as technology, how we facilitate our life around us, has an impact on our soul life, who we are, what we feel. Yeah? And I think when we look at what's happening around us now, we have to be very conscious on how deep it actually goes into the way we see each other, see ourselves, see each other, see our children, see our communities. Because it's like a lens. This technological developments become like a lens. When Steiner was speaking, of course, the height of technology was a steam engine. And it's interesting how, if you look at the scientists working at the time of Steiner, how often they had an analogy between a human being and a steam engine. You can go off the rails. You can build up pressure inside you. These are terms about a human being that came from the technology. We used them as a technological device. And if you see pictures of how they imagined a human being, you can see them from that time, 1890s, 1880s, like steam engines with pipes going round, yeah? And a little sort of boiler that creates the energy for us to move. Quite extraordinary that the human being was a mechanical device analogous to the height of technology, which was a steam engine. Now we're having the same. Just notice how often the language of computerese enters into our language when we communicate with each other. Yeah? Especially in certain fields, one of the life sciences. The life sciences sees a human being as an accumulation of data, of measurable outcomes. Yeah, that can be manipulated and used, and we are nothing else. Our feelings, our thoughts, everything is data. And this then transposes into what Marty has pointed out. This is data about ourselves that we share without our knowing, goes out into the world, and as we've seen in the last few weeks, has become even more apparent, is there to be manipulated. We know that Facebook ran experiments to change people's feelings, yeah, to see if it worked. And they did, without asking anybody, without telling anybody, but they used it. And this is a technology where, in a way, we have to be extremely wary and use with wisdom. Yeah. There was an American president of a university. He came out with this. Understanding ourselves and feeling for others does not come with a software upgrade. Yeah. So it goes so far. You can see it, the upgrading, the language you use, being wired, the view of the brain, of the human individuality is so much coloured by the advances of technology. Not that technology is a bad thing, of course not. But nevertheless, we have to see how deeply it goes into our souls, how deeply it goes into our view of what we are and what it means to be a human being. Because unless we see it, it uses us. And we become unconscious. And then that's the danger. It's always in that unconscious realm that we don't see where the dangers lurk, yeah, in many fields of life. And that's why in anthroposophy one tries as much as possible, attempts, not always successful, to sort of be awake to what's happening, to try and wake up to it. Because then we can make a judgment. We can say yes or no. Fair enough to say yes, but we should know we're saying yes. Yeah? And we also have the possibility, if it is really, we talked about freedom, we have the potential to say no. One very interesting writer on this whole theme is Harari. He's an Israeli writer. He wrote 2 books, recently published. One is called Homo Sapiens, which is sort of a view of history, very interesting view of history, where he looks at how cultures grow and die and how they develop over time. And then he succeeded that with a second book, Homo Deus, the man as God. And he shows in this book a sort of danger, a great danger, that because of our scientific acumen, the discoveries we've made, our techne abilities that we've produced and can make, we can control the world. And we can do it unthinkingly. Well, we just have to look at the wildlife around us, the extinction of animals. Yeah, 75% of insect life was just recently in Germany came out a study that the insects have been diminished by 75%. There's many other. We know about the bees. Yeah, we know about the rhinoceroses in Africa. Yeah, this is Homo Deus. But in the general environment, and now with the rising of the sea levels, all the rest of it, this is Homo Deus. Humanity as God. We can create and destroy the world we live in. We have that option. Yeah. But one of his theories, looking at the future, is there's another great danger, he says. A new religion. And he calls it dataism. The religion of data. And you can see this entering into so many spheres of human life, including the schools. Very aggressive entering into our educational systems, educational policy and pedagogical thinking without our even noticing or giving assent, a free assent to it. It's coming and it's getting stronger. And I'm convinced unless schools like the Waldorf schools, as communities, stand up and tell people what is happening, it'll get worse and worse and worse. One of the examples I can give you now is baby pizza. Not pizza, pizza. Sorry, I've been in Italy a week. Baby pizza. IELS, International Early Learning Survey. Sounds innocent. It's run by the OECD. And if you think your ministers are running your education systems, forget it. They're not. It's the OECD. Behind the scenes, totally undemocratic, but they are the pressure. Ministers pretend they're in charge. They will adopt ideas and say, oh, it's my great idea, because they all want to make a name while they're a few years as education minister. But actually, it's the OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. And they push a series of books, and I've got a lot of them, because when I was working with the European Council, I needed to be up to date. And they're very good. They're very interesting. But behind it all, there's a pressure. And this new one that's been done in secret, by the way, complete secrecy, IELS. It's testing children at the age of 5. At the moment, quite a few countries are resisting. Germany, France, Norway, Sweden, yeah, Denmark. A few are resisting, but that resistance won't last long. In the United States, United Kingdom, there's no resistance. And it's testing at 5. And I can tell you what they test, okay? They will test emerging literacy, emerging numeracy, executive function, which means self-control, empathy and trust on tablets. At 5. Quarter-an-hour test for each of those areas for young children of 5 years old. That becomes data. And that data you never get rid of again, as you know. It's never taken away. That's your record. And it can always be there to be used. Yeah? We can see there's no real secrecy in that world, however much they claim there is. Once your data's there, it's there for good. I was hearing from Christina, she mentioned in Italy. They know exactly who's been vaccinated and who not. Yeah? So when they make this draconian new law in Italy, every child has to have vaccination, they can see. Yeah, turn up to the doctor's surgery or something, they'll know, or anywhere, come to school, it's there, it's all visible. There's nothing we can hide. So these children at 5 will already be producing data. And data about empathy and trust. And this is a terrible step forward. There's an international noise about it now, beginning, but it's probably too late. The OECD is behind this, and when they're behind something, it's very difficult to resist, yeah, because it's economic. It's about the prosperity and the future and the jobs. They will always claim it. It's about jobs and employment and well-being and all the other words they use. So these are the sort of dangers. And it comes because we can. We can, because we have technology. So it's not just that technology is just used, it drives, because we can do it. It's a potential. Why not use it? If we can say it's for the good of everybody. We need to know when children are 5, of course, if they're suffering, if their vocabulary isn't developed because the parents don't have time to talk to them, which is a problem. We have many children with very limited vocabularies because parents just don't realize the importance of telling stories, repeating the same things, sitting around a table, talking. It's become a sort of knowledge that's been getting lost. So there are children who are linguistically impoverished. That's true. But whether this is a solution or whether it's more about caring communities, caring kindergartens, caring creches or caring schools that should take that on when they see the individual child rather than producing more data out from them and turning them into future consumers. So that's just one example, and I think Harari has a point there, that this data is use a very, a term that's quite shocking, but almost like a holy grail. Data is everything. Yeah? And if you think of the business-minded consultancies behind this, you think of McKinsey. Again, very powerful McKinsey, very powerful. Behind government thinking, business thinking, they're consultants across the world, and what McKinsey says goes. And they say, everything can be measured, and everything that can be measured can be managed. And that's the view of the human being. Everything can be measured, and everything that can be measured can be managed. And that's a prevalent view. And you just have to look at what PISA has done, yeah, the testing, how it creates or tries to create a homogeneous society across the world, everywhere. It's driven by PISA scores, whether you're top or bottom of the league table. Yeah? If it's the bottom of the league table when PISA comes out on literacy and numeracy, the government has to make some excuse and they have to do better, so change the curriculum. If you're at the top, you want to stay there. Yeah? And you get this incredibly competitive way of working between Singapore and Shanghai and the other at the top, and they want to stay there. Yeah? It enters into the soul, into the very pedagogical profession. And it's no wonder, like in a country like the UK, so many teachers just want to get out. The average career expectancy of a teacher in the UK is 5 years. Then out, because it is so destructive. They're not doing what they wanted to. They can see that something is dividing them from the very children they want to serve because of this endless paperwork, measuring, accountability, all these things, because we can. We have that ability now. And this is Harari speaking. Just as socialism took over the world by promising salvation through steam, so in the coming decades, new techno-religions are likely to take over the world by promising salvation through algorithms and genes. In the 21st century, we will create more powerful myths and more totalitarian religions than in any previous era. With the help of biotechnology and computer algorithms, these religions will not only control our minute-by-minute existence, but will be able to shape our bodies, brains, and minds, and to create entire virtual worlds, complete with hells and heavens. And this is not, I'm afraid, exaggeration. I just went to the Contemporary Art exhibition in Bologna this morning, where they have a wonderful exhibition on the Russian Revolution. And sure enough, there was the steam engine as the driver of change, because of course it brought huge changes in its wake. But now we're going through what they call the third industrial revolution, and going in probably quite close to the fourth, who knows. But this, I think, is very correct here, yeah? That salvation through algorithms and genetics. Yeah? It's all to do with what you can measure, and what measures matters, and nothing else. And there's Steiner's warning, mechanization of the soul. And what effect then does it have on children? As Harari says, we must prove to ourselves and to the system that we still have a value. And the value lies not in having experiences, but in turning these experiences into free-flowing data. Click, 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 click. Yeah, click, click. That's where we turn our experience. Go into the museum again. People are not looking at the pictures. They're turning their pictures into data. Yeah, and sending it off. Instagram, wherever, WhatsApp. Yeah, turn it into data. So the experience is lost. We used to laugh, I remember, rather arrogantly at Japanese tourists 20 years ago, yeah? You wondered why they were going around going click, 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 clicking themselves, clicking everywhere they were, yeah? That was rather, well, we can see, that was a false arrogance, because we're ending up in exactly the same. We're not really there, and if we've clicked ourselves there, taken a selfie or send it to someone else. Extraordinary, actually. But it gets in the way of the experience. Yeah? We sort of remove ourselves from the experiences we live in. So what does that do to us? What is the effect on our social life? Yeah? When we, as human beings, need human contact. We're desperate for human contact, and yet our technology puts it at a distance. It removes it. It becomes a screen. Again, I'm not a technophobe. I use it like everyone else, and I find it wondrous what I can do with it now. I can reach across the world to all my colleagues across the world. Wonderful. But yet I have to reconsider what's doing it to me. I'm on LinkedIn, and I notice what happens when I get a message saying somebody wants to be connected with you on LinkedIn. And you go, yes, you accept. What goes on? Why? And you sort of, oh, that's nice. Somebody's thought of me. Yeah, that goes through your mind. Oh, that's nice. Somebody thought of me. Now I'm up to 875 or something, or whatever it is. Yeah, but it's a pleasure. You feel, oh, I'm not alone in the world. Yeah, I'm not by myself. But actually, it's an illusion. You are. The screen has deceived you. Yeah. Now again, it has its uses. You can put out things about Waldorf education and educational innovation and creativity, and I send that out on Twitter as much as I can. But it is a bit of an illusion, really. It is. You think you can be effective in the world, but you think of what's behind it. And of course, that data's collected somewhere, secretly, and will be used to manipulate me or others in the course of that. Yeah. But that's not the only problem. Because of what the technology means is people will be out of work. That's clear too. We can see it already. In this country, 40% of young people have no employment. 40%. More in Spain, more in Greece. Yeah? It's a growing tendency that people can't find their fulfillment. Work is for our fulfillment. It's where we make the contacts, where we feel we have a purpose. It gives us a belonging. Yeah? And we feel we're doing something. That we're taking away from our young people in increasing numbers. And it'll increase. It's calculated in the next 10 years, 30% of the jobs we have now will go. Yeah? Self-driving cars. What happens to lorry drivers and taxi drivers, for a start? And so it goes on. Yeah? We're taking away our own sources of identity, in fact, because our work is part of our identity. I'm a Waldorf teacher. That's my identity, in a way. I'd be very sad to see that go. And so would any profession. So what happens with these young people? We bring them up in schools and say, we're preparing you for the world. And they work and they get their exams and they do all their learning. And they go into the world at 18 and the world says, sorry, we don't want you. You're no use. There's no space for you. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Especially at that age. It's a scar. It's a wound. And we know that people don't get over that very easily at all. Having once had that, no. There's no place for you. Perhaps in a coffee bar if you're lucky. In spite of your degree or your PhD, you can work in a coffee bar. It's a terrible blow. The whole self-esteem, the whole sense of worth, the qualities of idealism that all young people have is denigrated. It's valueless. You're valueless. You're useless. And Harari speaks of this too. Billions of people are likely to have no military or economic function. Providing food and shelter should be possible, but how to give meaning to their lives will be a huge political problem. How do we give meaning to people who have no role in society, are not economically viable, or whatever words they want to use to describe it? And in Italy and Spain it's particularly bad, but it's reckoned across the world that 12%, sorry, I've got that wrong, yeah, that in Europe, 1 in 5 adults under the age of 25 is unemployed. In the OECD themselves, believe it, say that 12% of people between 15 and 29 are not in school nor work. Yeah. And we can see it now increasingly that, I know in the UK, it's quite desperate that young people have nowhere to live. They go back to their parents. Now, I know in Italy this is more traditional than it is in countries like the UK, which may be a benefit for the Italians that they can do it. But for people in the UK, you know, my son came back when he was 30. And welcome him with an open heart, of course, naturally. But it's not the same. Not the same when they're little. And he's made his own life, he's been independent, and then suddenly he hasn't got somewhere to live. So it's hard. It's very hard. But this is an increasing factor. And also not only because of lack of work, because of inequality. The inequality is also growing, which is very unfair. Yeah? The richest 1% of the world's population own half of the world's wealth. And they will own 2/3 by 2030, if it goes on like this. 1% own half of the world's wealth. So what happens? The unemployment, the sense of uselessness, this technological manipulation. How do we prepare our young people and children for this potential world? What can one do in order for them to be able to face these challenges and still retain their humanity, their sense of optimism, their ability to create and to be? Well, I won't say the Waldorf schools have the answers, because I think that's a dangerous thought. Because Waldorf schools are processes. They are They flow. People come, people go. That's the way it goes. They're not the answer. They're a way of asking a question and looking for potential answers. But it would be an illusion to think that Waldorf schools are going to solve all these problems for the future. We have a way of working with children and young people that can enable them to perhaps find the answers, because we don't know what the questions are. 10 years' time, who knows what the world's going to be like, if it's here at all? Yeah? We don't know. So it's enabling them to find their own answers, not us providing the answers. And so the curriculum and the way we try and work, we do our best, doesn't always work, is to help them, enable them to find out for themselves later in life. Young people crave contact, especially teenagers. They need contact. And that's why the social media is so tempting. It is so tempting. Yeah? You can find contact. This is what we all need. We can't be human beings without that contact. We aren't human alone. We cannot be human alone. Yeah? This is a basic characteristic of being human. We need each other. Yeah? The whole growth of a child is in imitation, is looking at what the human world is and becoming part of it, of joining it, usually if they're not abused or treated well, with great joy to be part of the world that we inhabit. Yeah? But they need the other. Linguistic ability, even standing up, we take this as for granted. Standing up is imitative. If children are not brought up with human beings, some have been brought up by wolves, like in Ceylon, others have been brought up with antelopes, as in Algeria, they can never stand up. Even if they're rescued later, they will never, ever be able to take this posture. Because it's in our relationship, it's in our connections that we have that quality, this uprightness. Yeah? So it's understandable why the social media is so pervasive. It's contact, but it's also a desire for clicks. Yes? And then if you don't get them, what happens to you? If a young person is either unliked or trolled, then of course it hurts terribly. Yeah. But it's so easy to do, unlike someone. It's not like facing someone and saying, I don't like you anymore. Yeah? Face to face, which takes a certain amount of courage and self-development to be able to say to someone, I don't agree with you, I don't like the way you behave, face to face. But if you can do it like this, of course, it's much easier. It'll be longer. I said at the beginning, it'll be longer. Yes. Okay, thank you for warning me. And for parents, it can be convenient. We're seeing fear of the world, fear. I know again in the UK, this fear of paedophiles is magnified by the media, magnified. Of course, we know there are fewer crimes against children today than there ever were, okay, statistically. Yeah? But it doesn't look like that. When you see the news each evening, yeah, the child stolen, kidnapped, even murdered, becomes big, and it goes on for days and days. And that appeals to the fear in our hearts, because this is, of course, terrible when anything happens to a child. But it's magnified. If we look at it, I said, statistically, it was far worse in the 1950s than it is today. And yet that fear appeals to the parents. Oh dear, the world outside my home is dangerous. I can't let them roam the streets. I can't let them play outside. I don't know where they are. Make sure I've got a phone tracking device in their pocket, etc. All these things. Yeah. The element of risk is taken away, and people who aren't used to handling risk find it quite difficult later in life. Children used to climb trees and do risky things. Yeah. But now it's getting removed from the world. Don't take risks. And of course, social media reduces, we think, because we don't really know what happens up in the bedroom, reduces the risk. Yeah, they're at home. They're not out on the streets. They're not faced with drug pushers or gangs out on the streets. They're happy. We can sit down. Oh, they're upstairs. There's no danger there. That's what you think. Yes. But that's, again, you can see why. It's a temptation. At least they're here. At least they're with us. At least they're in the family and not roaming this dangerous jungle outside, which is a conception of the world. So as parents, we also, helping the young people means helping ourselves. Yeah? And it's interesting when they bring in these parental contracts. It's been experimented in the States and others where you work with the children and you have a contract. You can only use your phone, you can only use your iPad at certain times for this length of time. But this only works if the parent has a contract too and says, okay, I will abide by this contract. And no excuses like I've got to work now. No excuses, because if you're with a young person, they can see hypocrisy a mile off. They can scent hypocrisy, yeah? And you can't just sneak out to the back of the garden and use your iPhone if you've made a contract with your own children about reducing. So they've noticed this is it's effective if everybody in the social unit then follows the same rules. Then you can begin to limit, but I'm sure Margareta and other speakers will come on to this later, how that works with other ones. And we can see what's going wrong. It's visible. Self-harming. Cutting. Because, again, all this media concentrates on the body image. And you can see that this is deeply affecting. Now we have children of 3 self-cutting. 3 already feeling that they're unworthy, that they are not fitting, that they're not fitting the norm. Yeah, and inflicting pain on themselves for failing. Yeah? And this testing system we're bringing in adds to that. The sense of failure, the sense that you're not up to it, you're letting your parents down. It's terrible. So self-cutting is increasing. Here was one recent statistic. These same children, as they get older, will often use razors from pencil sharpeners or glass. They do it to get rid of pent-up feelings. Physical pain lets them temporarily escape their mental pain. And that's an increasing element too. And another one which you probably can't even imagine. But children can no longer, many children can't hold a pencil. They come to school at 6 and they have not the strength in their fingers to hold a pencil and have to go into physiotherapy for 6 months because they haven't ever held pencils. All they've done is clicked on iPads all their lives. So this skill doesn't exist. Yeah? And then that has to be redeemed through medical intervention at the age of 6. So this, again, we can see the symptoms of future problems and future disaster in our world. And so it enters the schools, not only in the questions of children's health, children's muscular ability, but also the testing regime, the data, producing the tests, more and more. So I've pointed out this now coming for 5-year-olds across the world, but it's already there in many countries already. And the Waldorf schools then have a problem. We have to live in the world we live in. We have to exist in the world. Where do we compromise? Where do we put the balance? Where do we fight? And in my work, I think it's very, very important that we don't see the Waldorf schools as an island. We have to work with like-minded colleagues from whatever educational background across the world. That's the only way we're going to have to try and create something that enables well-being with all this technology that's coming our way. And we cannot do it as a group of Waldorf schools alone. And that means understanding and learning from others, having proper conversations and being willing to have open ears to what they have to say, not just what we have to say, because we think we've got wonderful schools, but what they've got to say, and work with them in trying to challenge this tendency in the world and hopefully find a healthy post-digital world What is it? We don't know. That only lives in our imagination. But how can we use this incredible technology that brings so much with wisdom? And what sort of world would that become? And we have to fight for it. It's not going to come just sitting back and allowing it to wash over. It actually means a fight. And as Harari said, it's political. It's the polis. It's the community where we have to work towards that. So I've been warned I've got to finish quite soon. All right, good things. In the UK, book publishing for children is a huge success. Who would have thought that 5 years ago? All the warnings were e-books. But now we've seen that children love beautiful books. And the book publishing, children's book publishing is a very successful business now. Wonderful. Nice books, good books, beautifully illustrated, yeah, with stories for children. And because, of course, the tensile quality of a book, how it appeals to the senses, even the smell. And children are open to that, just as bibliophile parents are, yeah, in the same way. Yeah? So this is a growing thing. Children's books, giving the children a sense impression when they're told and read stories. And we can also now show that as far as comprehension is concerned, children learn better when they see a printed thing than a digital thing if it's more than one page. Yeah? One page is about the limit, but a book, and the beauty, of course, of books is you form a relationship with them. At least I do. I've got far too many in my house. It's terrible. You remember when you read it. Yeah, it's, oh, I read that. I know with my Parsifal main lessons, when I taught Parsifal for many years in England, I had students coming back in their 20s. And when they were having problems, they told me, we take the Parsifal book off the shelf. Just think, go for it. Because then it brings a memory back. And it's lovely. Who goes back to digital things like that? It hasn't got that quality of being part of the memory, of being reassuring, which a book like Parsifal can have. Because it's an experience then, and that experiential element comes into it as well. One of the important aspects of human society and how we work with each other is compassion. How we empathize and how we can feel in the place of the other. And a very interesting Polish Jewish writer who had to flee Poland and ended up in Leeds University, Bauman, wrote about it in a very wonderful way. He said, look, in the Middle Ages, if you saw suffering, it was there. You saw the leper on the street, the beggar on the street, and you had a choice. You could hand them some money or give them something, or not. But they were there. They were a living presence directly in front of you. Then you had a choice. But now, he said, we have artificial eyes. It's all at a distance. It's all at a distance. And we see terrible suffering. Of course, if you think of Syria, yeah, a place like terrible, Yemen, yeah, all the things that human cruelty, human injustice, we can see it. But it's through an artificial eye. And Bauman says, well, what does that do to your soul? You become a voyeur. You look at it, but you're not involved. Middle Ages, it was there in front of you. You could see it, you could smell it, it's present, and then you had your choice what to do, charitable or not. Now, everything is removed from us through this artificial eye. He said, what do we have to do? And I think it's a lovely phrase. He said, we have to create artificial arms. Now, artificial doesn't mean force in this word. It means out of art. That we embrace each other, that we create and embrace each other to counteract the distance that's being created by technology. And that's the role of the school, of schools, to find that way of inclusion, of caring, of showing compassion, of trying to understand. And that's what the children have to find in themselves as they grow up, in the classroom, in the community, in the playground. How this feeling of being with, of togetherness, of sharing, is deeply satisfying in the soul. It is, because then we're being human. And there's nothing wrong in taking a pleasure in that. And feeling happy because you've been able to help someone. That's not being egocentric or selfish or pride. It's being human. That quality of the embrace. Bauman says this, that's what we have to create in our institutions. And he said, the old institutions haven't worked. United Nations, they don't do it, they can't. We have to create totally new institutions, new ways of working, where we overcome this technological coldness, this mechanization, which we can use, but divides us, fragments us, it atomizes us, and then create the connection. We have to work on that. And this is really where I feel Waldorf communities have a role to play, to show it can be done. Yeah? To show it can be done. That we can overcome all the differences of history, gender, whatever, race, because actually, if you really look at it, everybody is an immigrant. Everybody in Europe is an immigrant. We all come from somewhere else, even if way back, but we all come from somewhere else. So we all share the same destiny. We all share it, and the more we're conscious of that, and the more we develop it through the curriculum with the young children and the young people, this quality of sharing, the more we can deal with this technological divisiveness that if we're not careful. And I think populism is part of this too. I'm sure the populism that we see is part of the technology. The technology enables it. Enables us to fragment, to lose the other through the technology. We think it's connecting us. Think of Facebook. Oh, he said, what did he say last week in the Congress? My dream is to connect everybody in the world. Sounds grand, but of course he does the opposite. It divides. Underneath it all, it's a division, not a connection. Yeah? If you look at Silicon Valley and all these great entrepreneurs, they're terribly idealistic, actually. They make a lot of money at the same time, that helps, but they are idealistic. It is an ideal, but it's a false one. And we have to counter that because it loses the heart to heart. It creates the barrier. And we have to do as much as we can to bring this digital resilience. I think that's the word, digital resilience. That when we're using the technology, we have the resilience to stay humane and human as much as we can. And I think that's one of the tasks that Rudolf Steiner gave. And how? Well, very briefly, 5 minutes. Playfulness. I think that's a key, because that leads to the arts and playfulness. Yeah? 50% of many Steiner schools' curriculum are the arts, and that's for a reason. Because through the arts that we participate. Yeah? We participate through, because in the arts we are communicating something from our inner life to another. If you write a book or a poem or paint a picture, it's an act of communication. Yeah? And every child does it. This is what the wonder of childhood is. Every child draws. Give a child a pencil, put them in front of a bit of paper and a pencil, and they will draw. Yeah. If I gave you a bit of pencil and paper, you wouldn't. Not usually, unless you're bored. Yeah? Then you doodle. But basically, it's in the children, it's to communicate. Yeah? And all the arts, music, everything, theatre, film, it's all this quality of communication. And that, I think, is so essential when we have this the false communication, yeah, to deal with true communication. It's also a challenge. You can't just get things by a click. You have to work. If you do a play or you play an instrument, it's work. You have to overcome something in yourself. So play, playfulness, creativity, the arts. The other one is outside. Just outside. Be outside. Nature. You've heard of nature deficiency disorder, I presume. But it is, they see with children who have attention deficiency, ADHD, that take them outside. And within 20 minutes, very often, things have calmed down. The nature is healing. There's a wonderful concept in Japan called tree bathing. And that just means going for a walk in the woods. But it's interesting that we have to now do it consciously. We have to tree bathe. So I go sometimes, often I tree bathe. It's lovely. But why? That's a good, interesting concept. Because when you tree bathe, you look at the trees differently. They become your friends. It's not quite the same as going for a walk in the woods. You feel something. And of course, trees have a deep social life. Yeah? It's all much slower. There's tree time. Yeah? If you think of tree time, this is where we slow down. Trees take time. Yeah? We should develop tree time to counter digital time. Yeah? That's digital time. Tree time, you can't make a tree grow faster than it wants to. Yeah? An oak, think of the oak. Oh, wonderful. And just bathe in them. Thank you, tree. I'm not talking about tree hugging. I'm talking about just being in the presence of trees. And for the children too, they feel it intuitively. They love it, yeah? You can be friends with trees, yeah? Don't know if you know, but trees found that trees help each other. You know, in beech trees, they have filaments of fungi that runs between the roots, and then one tree is suffering not enough water, the other tree will send them water. They have a social life, actually. And once you see that in nature, so I think that the outdoor play, we do know that outdoor play also improves academic achievement. Yeah, I won't read you all the background research for the moment. I have to finish. But time. I'm going to read you a poem, then I'm going to finish. It's a bit of old-fashioned poetry from England. I read it twice. But it's about this time element, yeah? It's called leisure, but it is a bit old-fashioned, but never mind. What is this life, if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare? No time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep and cows. No time to see, when woods we pass, where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see, in broad daylight, streams full of stars like skies at night. No time to look at beauty's glance and watch her feet and how they dance. No time to wait till her mouth can enrich that smile her eyes began. Oh, poor life this is, if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare. I read it again. What is this life, if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare? No time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep and cows. No time to see, when woods we pass, where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see, in broad daylight, streams full of stars like skies at night. No time to turn at beauty's glance and watch her feet and how they dance. No time to wait till her mouth can enrich that smile her eyes began. What poor life this is, full of care, if we have no time to stand and stare. The antidote to digitalization. Standing and staring. Being bored. It doesn't matter. So I finish with just a few things from Rudolf Steiner, if you'll allow me. Later stages of life are based on what we foster in school, you see. If we are deeply convinced that we are educating with a whole lifetime in mind, and not just for the current moment, then we also know how much we need you parents in order to move forward with the idea of the Waldorf School. So even he, way back, was seeing that what we're doing now, what we're managing to bring about by working together, sharing our thoughts and our feelings together is really what makes a Waldorf school. So, thank you.